Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us at the market site in Times Square, we have Phil Mackintosh, Chief Economist at Nasdaq. We're going to take a look at the consumer and what it means for the market, supply chain, and prices across the board. Phil, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks. And let's kick it off and talk about the market and how it's performed even with rates on the rise.
Yeah, I mean, the rates are starting to tick back up. That's because of all the inflation talk and people starting to get more confident that inflation is here to stay. But at the same time, the market's been pretty strong. It's kind of come back close to all-time highs, and that's because of other good economic data, which has been positive for stocks and earnings data as well.
Right, and strong retail sales continue to prop up the market as we see improvement across all sectors. In your note this morning, you even noted eating and clothing as well, which of course was a laggard. I mean, if we look outside of our studio in Times Square, it feels as if things are back to normal. It is definitely getting back to normal. What does a healthy consumer mean for stocks, the supply chain, even margins?
Yeah, so I think, the retail sales data was one of the really good data points that came out. We're way above pre-COVID levels, but as we know, a lot of that is buying of goods, not so much services. That's why it's good to see the restaurants starting to pick up, because that'll flow through into employment as well, and it should also flow through into wages, which isn't, I guess, great news for the companies because wages are a cost. But what is good news for the companies with such strong retail growth is they've been able to raise prices during this cycle, so they've kept their margins whole. If we actually look at some of the wage data, it's really promising from a, wage equality perspective, because it's the low-income people that are really benefiting the most from the latest cycle of retail demand and supply chain shortages.
And if you look at the consumer, one would think are on the other side of the pandemic, wishful thinking, but is that really the case?
Yeah, not so fast at the moment. We're actually seeing a little uptick in America, especially in some of the Midwest states. We're seeing some news that they might actually start to quarantine students and sort of send them back to remote learning. But in Europe, it's much worse. They're actually seeing close to record levels of infections. And so, you sort of think of COVID's gone, but it's definitely still coming through in waves. It's not just laying down.
Right. So is this something that we should be worried about then? I mean, is this something that we just have to learn to live with?
I think the thing is we are starting to learn to live with it in Europe and in the States. We're doing, like you said, outside, we're doing pretty much normal things now. So we're coming into contact with other humans much more. And yet we're still only getting the same caseloads as we got in the middle of when we were quarantined and being very safe. And one of the reasons it's a bit different is if you look at the new cases, it's predominantly unvaccinated people. So the vaccinated people rarely catching COVID, much more rarely going to hospital and rarely dying as well. So really it's a sort of different sample. And even if you look at Europe, it's a lot of the Eastern European countries with less vaccinations that are seeing most of the cases. I think one of the things that we can also be comforted with all of the booster shot discussions happening right now is Israel's kind of been ahead of the curve most of the way through, really. They got people vaccinated well, they got them vaccinated early, but they saw a really big wave during our summer, and that's almost completely gone because they got out and they gave everybody booster shots, and so Israel's back down to a really low level of new cases.
Oh, good news. I get mine in 2 weeks. That's a good thing to hear. All right, Phil, appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.